Have you ever walked into a place and instantly, felt transported? Almost like the very walls are whispering stories, and the air itself just, holds this certain magic,
Oh, absolutely. Like just last week, my D&D group, we were playing and we entered this crumbling temple, totally overtaken by jungle. And it was supposed to be like a quick in and out to grab a relic, but the atmosphere was so thick with this ancient energy, We ended up spending hours just role-playing interactions with these spirits that were lingering there.
Wow.
Totally derailed our plans, but honestly, it was one of the most memorable sessions we've had.
That's what I love about a well-crafted setting, right?
Yeah.
It just sucks you in.
Yeah.
Seems like our deep dive today is all about creating that magic in our D&D games.
Mm-hmm.
We've got excerpts from Master the Art of Themed Dungeons from LitRPG Reads.
Yes.
I'm excited to see what we can learn.
Yeah, the article kicks off by emphasizing why themed dungeons are so much more than just window dressing.
Right.
They're not just about aesthetics. They're about transforming a dungeon into a living, breathing entity that tells its own story.
And that story, woven into the dungeon's fabric, becomes the foundation for player engagement, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just about fighting random monsters, it's about facing challenges and enemies intrinsically linked to the dungeon's narrative.
Yeah, the article uses some really great examples to illustrate this. Instead of just a generic crypt crawling with undead, imagine a necromancer's lair where the architecture reflects their tragic past.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe even hinting at how they fell into the practice of necromancy. Or instead of just stumbling upon, a random clockwork contraption, your players find themselves in a sprawling factory embodying an ambitious artificer's dreams and nightmares.
It makes you think about those places in real life or even in books and movies that have that power to transport you.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Colosseum in Rome, for example, with its echoes of gladiatorial combat and the roar of the crowd.
Yeah.
It's not just a pile of rocks, it's a monument to a whole era.
Right. And that's the feeling we want to evoke in our players when they enter a themed dungeon.
Yeah.
We want them to be completely immersed in the environment, invested in its story, and eager to discover its secrets.
So how do we go about choosing the perfect theme for our dungeon? There are endless possibilities.
Well, the article suggests starting by aligning the dungeon theme with your overall campaign's story arc.
Okay.
This ensures that the dungeon feels like an organic part of the world, not just a random side quest thrown in for the sake of it.
Right.
For example, if your campaign revolves around an ancient prophecy, a celestial-themed dungeon would be a natural fit.
Or if your players are on a quest to recover a powerful artifact, the dungeon where it's hidden could reflect the artifact's powers or history.
Exactly. But it's not just about the overarching campaign. You can also tie themes into individual player backstories, which adds a whole other layer of personalization.
Right.
If one of your players has a character whose backstory involves a haunted forest, why not incorporate a forest-themed dungeon?
I like that.
It'll give that player a chance to really shine and feel like their character's past is directly tied to the current adventure.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
It makes each player feel like the main character in their own personal story,
Right.
even as they're working together as a group.
Yeah.
But where do we go from there? We have a theme. Now, how do we actually design the dungeon itself?
Well, the article breaks it down into several key elements. The first is layout and geography.
Okay.
This is where you determine the physical structure of the dungeon and how it reflects the chosen theme.
So, a labyrinthine dungeon would emphasize confusion and disorientation with winding corridors and dead ends.
Right.
While a volcanic dungeon might be built around treacherous lava flows and unstable terrain.
Precisely. The layout should reinforce the theme and create a specific mood for the players.
Right.
It's about using the environment to tell a story before a single monster even shows up.
Then we've got unique mechanics and environmental hazards. How do we use those to enhance the theme?
These are crucial for creating interactive experiences that go beyond just rolling dice to hit things.
Right.
For instance, think about a frozen cavern where the slippery ice makes movement and combat a challenge. Or in a wizard's tower, you might have magical traps or glyphs that trigger unexpected effects.
Those are great examples. And puzzles.
Yep.
Can't forget about puzzles.
Right?
How do we design those so they aren't just random brain teasers thrown in for the sake of it?
The key is to make the puzzles feel intrinsically linked to the dungeon's theme.
Right.
In a ruined library, for instance, the puzzles might involve deciphering ancient texts or rearranging scattered scrolls to unlock a hidden passage.
Or in a sunken temple, the puzzles might involve manipulating water levels or currents to access a hidden chamber.
Exactly. The goal is to make the players feel like they're unraveling the dungeon's secrets and uncovering its hidden depths.
And speaking of inhabitants,
Enemy encounters. This is where we get to bring the theme to life in a very tangible way.
Absolutely. We want to choose enemies that reflect the dungeon's environment and story. In a volcanic lair, we'd expect to encounter fire elementals and creatures adapted to intense heat.
right.
In a haunted keep, we might face ghosts, specters, and other manifestations of the site's tragic history.
It's almost like we're casting the dungeon itself, with each enemy playing a specific role in its overall narrative.
That's a great way to think about it. And don't be afraid to get creative and come up with your own unique creatures that fit the specific theme of your dungeon.
So we got the layout, the hazards, the puzzles, the enemies, but how do we go beyond the mechanics and really ramp up that feeling of immersion?
Well, the article dives into two key areas for enhancing that: backstory and atmospheric details.
Okay, backstory makes sense, right? It's like giving the dungeon a history, a purpose within the world.
Exactly. It grounds the dungeon in the campaign setting, giving players a reason to care about what they're exploring. Like an abandoned monastery, for example, could have a fascinating backstory involving a fallen order of knights, or a long-forgotten religious sect, hinting at the secrets that might lie within.
Right.
Or think about, like, a submerged city with legends of its downfall. It instantly sparks curiosity, right? What happened? Are there survivors? What treasures or dangers await beneath the waves?
Right.
The backstory adds intrigue, encourages players to, like, dig deeper, to role play, to ask questions, to truly become part of the world.
And that's where the atmospheric details come in,
Right.
painting that vivid picture for the players.
Yes, this is where we engage the senses. The article talks about using sensory details like sound, light, and even smell to breathe life into the dungeon. Instead of just saying, you enter a dark crypt,
Yeah.
you might describe the musty smell of decay, the faint dripping of water, and the distant echoes of ghostly whispers.
Ooh, that's chilling. Suddenly, I'm right there with my character, feeling the goosebumps prickle on my skin.
Exactly. It's about using those descriptive details to make the dungeon feel like a real, tangible place. And don't be afraid to play with contrasts. Imagine transitioning from the oppressive darkness of that crypt to the sudden vibrancy of a hidden fey glade, complete with the scent of wildflowers and the sound of birdsong.
That's a good point, yeah.
That shift in atmosphere will have a lasting impact.
This is giving me so many ideas. I'm starting to think about my next dungeon in a whole new way. But before we get too carried away with design, we need to talk rewards. How do we make the loot as compelling as the dungeon itself?
It's time to go beyond just gold and generic magic items. The article encourages us to think about narrative-driven rewards, things that tie into the dungeon's theme and story.
So instead of just finding a +1 sword, they might discover a blade specifically forged in the volcanic fires of the dungeon they just conquered. Maybe even with a unique ability related to fire.
Exactly. Or in that corrupted cathedral, maybe they find a holy relic that sheds light on the events that led to its downfall, giving them valuable information for the larger campaign.
The rewards become part of the story, not just a loot list to check off. And I love the article's point about unique items and equipment. Instead of generic gear, they get something special, something that reflects the dungeon's theme.
Right. Frostbrand swords in an icebound labyrinth, boots of quicksilver in an enchanted forest, items that enhance gameplay and connect back to the dungeon's identity.
So much more interesting than just a random pile of gold. And what about the rewards that go beyond the material? You mentioned those earlier.
Ah, yes, the intangible rewards.
Right.
These could be things like gaining ancient knowledge from a forgotten library, forming an alliance with a powerful being they encountered within the dungeon, or even lifting a curse that was plaguing the land, as a result of whatever happened in that location.
Those are fantastic. They shape the characters and the world around them and often have repercussions that play out over multiple sessions, even impacting the larger campaign. Talk about memorable.
The article highlights 3 inspirational examples to get our creative juices flowing. We've got the Ashen Spire, a volcano fortress filled with challenges related to heat and unstable terrain.
I could practically feel the heat already. What kind of enemies would we expect to find in a place like that?
Think fire elementals, magma creatures, maybe even a fire giant or a particularly nasty red dragon lurking in the heart of the volcano.
And for rewards, perhaps a weapon forged in the volcano's heart, or a shield imbued with the power to resist fire.
Exactly, you're getting it. The possibilities are endless when you start thinking about how the theme can influence every aspect of the dungeon.
What's the next example that caught your eye?
The Everwood Labyrinth. living forest constantly shifting and changing, where nature itself presents the challenge.
That's such a cool concept. The dungeon is almost a character in itself. What kind of encounters could we create in a place like that?
Right. Think about creatures that embody the power of nature. Treants, dryads, maybe even some corrupted fey creatures twisted by some evil that has infiltrated the woods. And the paths themselves could be constantly changing, disorienting the players and forcing them to rely on their wits to navigate.
And what about the rewards? Would they be more nature-themed as well?
Absolutely. A staff made from a sacred tree, granting the wielder control over plant life, or perhaps a seed that can be planted to create a grove of healing trees.
I love it. It's all so interconnected, so deliberate. Okay, last example. What's the final theme dungeon that caught your attention?
The Luminous Depths. This is a sunken temple, offering a completely different kind of challenge related to underwater exploration and manipulation of tides and currents.
This one sounds amazing. It's like a whole other world down there with its own rules and its own mysteries. What kind of creatures might lurk in these depths?
Giant squid, bioluminescent jellyfish, maybe even a kraken guarding its watery domain.
Yes.
And think about the challenges of fighting underwater, of limited visibility, of the pressure crushing in on you from all sides.
And what about the rewards? Perhaps a trident that gains control over water, or a magical helm that allows the wearer to breathe underwater.
Exactly. Again, it's about making the rewards feel special and relevant to the dungeon's theme.
Okay, I'm completely on board with this whole themed dungeon approach. But the article also mentions some additional themes to explore that go beyond typical fantasy tropes. What did you think about those?
Those were fascinating. We've got psychological themes, temporal themes, even cosmic themes.
Okay, tell me more about these psychological themes. How do you make a dungeon that messes with the players' minds?
Imagine a dungeon where the environment shifts and changes based on the player's thoughts and emotions, using illusion magic and shifting walls.
Whoa, it's like the dungeon is reading their minds. How do you handle that mechanically?
You could have the dungeon's creatures react differently depending on the player's mental states. If they're confident and aggressive, the dungeon might become more challenging.
Oh, yeah.
But if they're feeling fearful or hesitant, it could become more surreal and disorienting, preying on their anxieties.
That's so cool. It adds a whole psychological thriller element to the game. But what about rewards in a dungeon like that? If it's all about the mental and emotional, what do the players get for overcoming those challenges?
Well, the rewards might not be physical objects, but insights, breakthroughs, maybe even emotional resolutions. Imagine a player achieving a moment of clarity that helps them overcome a personal flaw, or forging a new bond with another player's character through a shared experience of vulnerability.
Wow, that's deep. It's about rewarding their growth as characters, not just their ability to fight and loot. I'm loving this.
It's a great way to explore the character's inner demons and make them confront their deepest fears and desires, and it can lead to some really powerful role-playing moments.
Okay, next up, temporal themes. How do you incorporate time manipulation into a dungeon? It sounds complicated.
Think about dungeons that play with time. Time loops, accelerated aging, even the ability to travel through different points in history. It could be a dungeon where time flows differently on different levels, or where completing a certain task rewinds time, forcing them to rethink their choices.
My mind is already spinning with the puzzles and paradoxes you could create. It's like taking the concept of a dungeon and adding a whole extra dimension.
Exactly. It challenges players to think differently, to consider the consequences of their actions in a whole new way.
Okay, last but not least, cosmic themes. This sounds vast.
This is where we get to explore the vastness of space, the mysteries of the universe, and the forces beyond our comprehension.
What kind of settings are we talking about here?
A dungeon built on a drifting asteroid, a gateway to another dimension, even a black hole remnant. It's about pushing the boundaries of what a dungeon can be.
And the encounters. Are we talking about aliens and cosmic horrors?
Creatures from beyond the stars, beings of pure energy, manifestations of cosmic forces. The possibilities are literally astronomical.
Wow. It's like taking D&D and launching it into the realms of science fiction.
And the rewards. Maybe a weapon forged from a dying star, or a cloak that grants the wearer the ability to manipulate gravity.
This is incredible. It's making me rethink the whole concept of what a dungeon can be. But with all these amazing themes and ideas, we need to make sure we're not forgetting about the fundamentals of good game design.
You're right. The article reminds us about the importance of balance, making sure we're not overloading the dungeon with one type of challenge at the expense of others.
So we need to balance combat, exploration, and role-playing. making sure there's something for everyone at the table.
Exactly. Not every encounter has to be a fight to the death. Sometimes the most memorable moments come from clever solutions, social interactions, or creative uses of the environment.
It's about creating a well-rounded experience that keeps the players engaged and invested, no matter what their playstyle. Feels like we've gone on an epic journey just talking about this article. I'm seeing dungeons in a whole new light now. Not just a hack and slash obstacle course, but like a canvas for a richer experience, you know?
It is amazing to think about how much dungeons have evolved. Like early D&D dungeons, they were often just a series of interconnected rooms with random encounters. Almost an afterthought, really.
Yeah, back then it was all about dungeon crawls and rolling for random loot. Just a test of your ability to survive.
Exactly. But as the game has matured, so has the approach to design.
Yeah.
Themed dungeons, they represent a shift toward more narrative-driven experiences. The environment and challenges, they become integral to the story, not just a backdrop.
And it makes sense why that resonates with players today, right?
Yeah.
We're not just looking for a fight. We want immersion. We want to uncover secrets, solve puzzles, be part of a story that feels meaningful.
Right.
Themed dungeons offer all of that and more.
They empower dungeon masters to flex their creative muscles, and craft truly unique experiences. And, as we've discussed, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, from fiery fortresses to haunted asylums to cosmic realms that boggle the mind. The only limit is our imagination.
And the real beauty of themed dungeons is that they can be tailored to any campaign setting, any group of players, any style of play.
So whether your game is gritty low fantasy or, a high-flying epic adventure, there's a themed dungeon out there waiting to be discovered and brought to life at your table.
And remember the power of collaboration, involving your players, weaving their backstories into the dungeon's design. That can lead to some truly magical moments.
It's true. When everyone feels invested in the story and the setting, the game becomes so much more immersive and rewarding for everyone.
Exactly.
It's not just a DM story anymore. It's a shared creation.
Well said. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the art of themed dungeons, let's leave our listeners with a final challenge.
Okay, I'm ready. Lay it on us.
I challenge each and every one of you to embrace the power of themed dungeons in your next campaign. Don't settle for generic dungeon crawls and random encounters.
Think bigger. Think deeper. What's the story you want to tell? What atmosphere do you want to evoke?
Right.
What challenges will truly test your players' mind, body, and spirit?
Use the things we've discussed as a springboard, but don't be afraid to experiment and create your own unique twists.
Let those creative juices flow. D&D is a game after all. Let your imagination run wild and create an experience that you and your players will remember for years to come. It's about creating those moments that make you say, remember that time when, and launch into a story that everyone at the table can share.
We want to hear all about your themed dungeon creations. Share your ideas, your challenges, and your triumphs in the comments below.
We learned so much from this amazing community, so let's keep the conversation going. And as always, happy gaming.